बिमस्बूकीन अला नुबद्दिल अम्सालकुम व नुनशियकुम फीमा ला तालमून वलकद अलिमतुमुन नशाअल ऊला फलौला तज़क्करून अफ़रअयतुम मा तहरुसून अंतुम तजरऊनहु अम नहनु ज़ारिऊन लौ नशाअ लजअलनाहु हुतामन फजलतुम तफक्कमून इन्ना लमुग़रमून बल नहनु महरूमून अफ़रअयतुमुल माअ अल्लज़ी तशरबून अअंतुम अंजलतमूहु मिनल मुज़्नि अम नहनुल मुंजिलून लौ नशाअ जअलनाहु जालन फलौला तशकुरून अफ़रअयतुमुन नारल्लती तूरून अअंतुम अंशअतुम शक्करतहा अम नहनुल मुनसिलून नहनु जअलनाहु तज़किरतन व मताअल लिल मुक़वीन फसब्बिह बिस्मि रब्बिकल अज़ीम फला उक़सिमु बिमवाक़िइन नुजूम व इन्नहु लक़समुन लौ तालमून अज़ीम इन्नहु लक़ुरआनुन करीम फ़ी किताबिन मकनून ला यमस्सुहु इल्लल मुतहहरून तंजीलुम मिर रब्बिल आलमीन अफ़बिहाज़ल हदीस अंतुम मुदहिनून वतजअलून रिज़्क़कुम अन्नकुम तुकज़्ज़िबून फ़लौला इज़ा बलगतिल हुल्क़ूम व अंतुम हीनइज़िन तंज़ुरून व नहनु अक़रबु इलैहि मिनकुम वलाकिन ला तुबसिरून फ़लौला इन कुन्तुम गैर मदीनीन तर्जिऊनहा इन कुन्तुम सादिकीन व अम्मा इन काना मिनल मुक़र्रबीन व रहूं व रैहानो व जन्नातो नईम व अम्मा इन काना मिन अस्हाबिल यमीन व सलामुन लक मिन अस्हाबिल यमीन व अम्मा इन काना मिनल मुकज़्ज़िबीन अद्दॉल्लीन व नुज़ुलुम मिन हमीम व तस्लियतु जहीम इन्न हाज़ा लहुल हक़्क़ुल यकीन फसब्बिह बिस्मि रब्बिकल अज़ीम सदक़ल्लाहुल अलीयुल अज़ीम अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम अल्लाहु ला इलाहा इल्ला हुवल हय्युल क़य्यूम ला ताख़ुज़ुहु सिनतुन व ला नौम लहु मा फ़िस समावाति व मा फ़िल अर्ज़ मन ज़ल्लज़ी यशफ़उ इंदहु इल्ला बिइज़्निही यअलमु मा बैन अयदीहिम व मा ख़ल्फ़हुम व ला युहीतून बिशैइन मिन इल्मिही इल्ला बिमा शाअ वसिअ कुर्सियुहुस समावाति वल अर्ज़ वला यऊदुहु हिफ़्ज़ुहुमा व हुवल अलियुल अज़ीम ला इक्राह फ़िद्दीन क़द तबय्यना रुश्दु मिनल गय फ़मन यकफ़ुर बित्ताग़ूति व युमिन बिल्लाहि फ़क़द इस्तमसक बिल उर्वतिल वुस्क़ा ला इंफ़िसाम लहा वल्लाहु समीउन अलीम अल्लाहु वलियुल लज़ीना आमनु युख़रिजुहुम मिनज़ ज़ुलुमाति इलन नूर वल्लज़ीना कफ़रू औलियाहुमुत ताग़ूत युख़रिजूनहुम मिनन नूरि इलज़ ज़ुलुमात उलाइका अस्हाबुन नार हुम फ़ीहा ख़ालिदून अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम वस्समसि वज़्ज़ुहाहा वल क़मरि इज़ा तलाहा वन्नहारि इज़ा जल्लाहा वल्लैलि इज़ा यग़शाहा वस्समाइ वमा बनाहा वल अर्ज़ि वमा तहाहा वनफ़्सिन वमा सव्वाहा फ़अल्हमहा फ़ुजूरहा व तक़वाहा क़द अफ़लह मन ज़क्काहा व क़द ख़ाब मन दस्साहा कज़्ज़बत समूद बितग़वाहा इज़ इंबअशा अश्क़ाहा फ़क़ाल लहुम रसूलुल्लाहि नाक़तल्लाहि व सुक़याहा फ़कज़्ज़बूहु फ़अक़रूहा फ़दमदम अलैहिम रब्बुहुम बिज़न्बिहिम फ़सव्वाहा वला यख़ाफ़ु उक़बाहा अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम वल अस्र इन्नल इंसाना लफ़ी खुस्र इल्लल्लज़ीना आमनू व अमिलुस्सॉलिहाति वतवासौ बिल हक़्क़ि वतवासौ बिस्सब्र। बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम कुल या अय्युहल काफ़िरून ला अअबुदु मा तअबुदून वला अंतुम आबिदून मा अअबुद वला अना आबिदुम मा अबदतुम वला अंतुम आबिदून मा अअबुद लकुम दीनुकुम वलिय दीन। बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम कुल हुवल्लाहु अहद अल्लाहुस समद लम यलिद वलम यूलद वलम यकुल लहू कुफुवन अहद। बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम कुल औज़ु बिरब्बिल फलक मिन शर्रि मा खलक व मिन शर्रि गासिकिन इज़ा वक़ब व मिन शर्रि नफ़्फ़ासाति फ़िल उक़द व मिन शर्रि हासिदिन इज़ा हसद। बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम कुल औज़ु बिरब्बिन नास मलिकिन नास इलाहिन नास मिन शर्रिल वसवासिल खन्नास अल्लज़ी युवस्विसु फ़ी सुदूरिन नास मिनल जिन्नति वन नास। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद वअज्जिल फ़रजहू। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला बर हबीब खुदा खत्मुल अंबिया नारे सलवात। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला आलि मुहम्मद वअज्जिल फ़रजहू। जो भी मशरूफ़ सलाम शोहदा रहता है वो तो रहता नहीं पर नाम सदा रहता है। शिम्र कहता था यही माँ है अली अकबर की जिसका एक हाथ कलेजे पे दरा रहता है। जो भी मशरूफ़ सलामे शोहदा रहता है ये शर्मिंदगी पानी के न पहुँचाने की नेज़े पे भी सरे आबां से झुका रहता है। शाम होती है तो ऊँटों से उतरते हैं हराम पर सरे शाह तो नेज़े पे चढ़ा रहता है। रोके ये हिंद की बेटी ने सकीना से कहा सर तेरा किस लिए हर वक्त खुला रहता है। वो लगी कहने यतीमों की निशानी है यही कुर्तबे वारसी बच्चों का फटा रहता है। जो भी मशरूफ़ सलामे शोहदा रहता है। बर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सलवात। Please welcome Sheikh Bilal Husain with your loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajah.
Inshallah, if we can begin with one Surah Fatiha.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الذين يقولون ربنا هب لنا أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد صل على محمد أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكر مسائب آل محمد. Today we have a majlis commemorating the Shahadat of Bibi Sakina. In Tariq, in history, there's a statement that says, At-Tariq kana maktubun bid-dam, that history is written in blood. What that means to say as a statement is that those dates that we are certain of are usually associated with a day in which blood has been spilled. So for example, the Shahadat of Imam Husain, there's no doubt about it. The Shahadat of Imam Ali, there's no doubt about it. But other than these shahadat that have spilling of blood associated with them, many times the shahada that we have in our books, in our calendars, there are other dates that coincide with that shahadat as well. And what will happen is you'll see that different dates can be associated with the commemoration of the martyrdom of many different personalities. For example, our second Imam, his shahadat is sometimes commemorated in the beginning of Safar, sometimes on the 28th of Safar, and there are different narrations that may point to this. Similarly with Bibi Sakina, there are different dates that may be associated with her shahadat, and what you'll find is at times there can be inconsistency. In our community, we mark it today, in other communities, they mark it on other dates. And the truth of it is, more than uncovering the reality of what the actual date of shahadat is, the point of the shahadat is for us to have tawassul by that personality and to connect with the personality. So it isn't necessarily so significant to say that we need to know exactly the date, but rather what's more significant is that we have an affiliation with the personality and a connection with whose tawassul it is we're doing, and that we are conscious of the fact that this person has a right with Allah and that we can ask by their right to fulfill our needs. The verse that we began our discussion with from Surah Al-Furqan talks about a dua of the mu'mineen. And it talks about the dua of the mu'mineen where Allah says the believers are those people يقولون ربنا هب لنا أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين. Make for us from amongst our wives and our offspring the coolness of our eyes. وَجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. This verse talks about an ideal state, that a believer is someone whose wife and children or spouse and children should be the coolness of their eyes. When we talk about the coolness of their eyes, we talk about someone who meets all of their obligations and is better than the minimum obligation that needs to be achieved. The coolness of someone's eyes could be, for example, for many things. For example, if you're thirsty, a drink of cool water can be something, it satisfies you, it makes you happy. And that would be the coolness of your eyes. Seeing various types of success in this world can be a source of happiness for you. But the significance of this particular verse is the indication that if you're asking Allah to make your spouse and your children the coolness of your eyes, it has to be something that is complete. Meaning it's not that one day I'm happy with them, the next day I'm sad with them, one day they do something good, another day they do something bad, and my scale keeps shifting. The true meaning of the coolness of your eyes, that my spouse, my children especially, should be the coolness of my eyes, is that whatever decisions they make in life, they take into consideration what Allah wants as part of that decision. At any time, for example, I can see that my family, in the decisions that it makes in life, is looking at what Allah desires as part of the decision-making process, that this would be something that makes me happy to know that this is a sense of satisfaction that we achieve. Now, there are a number of ways that we know that this to be true. For example, there's a discussion that talks about and says that, for example, when we say the deceased can visit the family after their death, that the ruh comes and visits its families. So there's a discussion where someone comes to our sixth Imam and asks him, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, what happens to a soul when a person dies? Imam Sadiq says, what do you think happens? The guy says, well, in our traditions, we say that these green birds that we see flying way above all the other birds, these are the souls of the believers, and Allah gives them freedom to wander around the world and they can see everything. Imam Sadiq replies and he says that the soul of the believer is not something so insignificant to Allah that He would make it a bird. Meaning that what you're saying is nonsense. It doesn't mean anything. So they say, then Ya Ibn Rasulullah, what happens? So Imam Sadiq begins an explanation. And when we look at this explanation, he says there are those people whose souls were impious and they were bad people. And Allah sends them to a valley for their punishment of hell before they reach hell. And this is called Wadi Barhut. And there's an actual valley in Yemen called Wadi Barhut. And the Ahlulbayt would explain that this is one of the valleys of hell, and people go here and they start suffering the punishment before they go to the Day of Judgment. Then Imam Sadiq says there are those people who are mutawassita, that they're in the middle, that they have some reward, some punishment. For them, what happens is that they wait for the Day of Judgment and they rise on that day and they receive their accounting. But for the pious person, the believer, Allah sends them to Wadi Salam. Wadi Salam, Imam Sadiq explains, is a valley from the valleys of heaven. And Allah sends the deceased to a place in the valley of heaven. And Imam Sadiq continues the description. He says, when a new soul comes, it's still worried about its family, its responsibilities, its day-to-day attachment. So the other believers that are in Wadi Salam, they give it time. They leave it alone. And eventually, as it acclimates to the fact that death has come and this is a new place for it, they start asking about their friends and their relatives, and they know of the condition of the believers. So Imam Sadiq explains that the deceased goes to a valley that's like the valley of heaven, and he begins enjoying the pleasures of heaven before he gets to heaven. Then he continues and he says that it is also permissible for the believers to come visit their relatives. At least once a year, a believer gets to see his relatives, which is what we describe in Surah Qadr. When we say, تَنَزَّلُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ وَالْرُوحُ فِيهَا بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهِمْ مِنْ كُلِّ أَمْرٍ. That Allah sends down the angels and the spirits. And it says that many of the spirits have the ability to visit their family. And that your deceased, if Allah gives them ability, visit you on Thursday nights. Which is why don't treat Thursday night like a normal night. Thursday night is a night of ibadah. Rather, even when you look in the Quran, when the sons of Yaqub came to Yaqub and said, seek forgiveness for us. We heard our brother Yusuf. We're sorry. Father, ask Allah's forgiveness. Yaqub says, Astaghfir lakum. I will soon seek forgiveness for you. He doesn't do it immediately. He waits for Thursday night. Because Thursday night, Allah says, I send the angels to the lowest of heavens and they call out, is there any believer who has a desire that we can fulfill for them? So Thursday nights are a very important spiritual night. You shouldn't miss them. You should do something special every Thursday night, that it's a time of spirituality. It's a time when the angels are close and Allah allows the spirits to visit their family. Now, some spirits like to visit their family. For them, it's a reward. And others, it's a punishment. Meaning the visitation of family for a soul is not just a reward, but it can also be a punishment. How? Let me explain. Some souls, when they come to visit their family, they see their family busy in ibadat. And for this is a reward for the soul. That now, after you die, you realize what's really important in life. And you see your family busy in those things, and Allah is rewarding you. You got to see your family doing ibadat, and you're like, thank God they're using their time well. But for other souls, when they go to visit their family on a Thursday night, Allah shows the family busy in the world, busy in enjoying life. And the deceased, knowing the value of this Thursday night, for him it's a punishment that he can't tell them, don't waste your time, go do something important for your religious self. So what happens? Some souls come to visit their families, they get a reward, they get to see their family being pious, they get to see their family doing good deeds, they get to see their family busy in important things. And they say, thank God I was given this opportunity, and thank God my family is busy in good things. And then there are other people who that same Thursday night, they see their family maybe watching movies, na'uzubillah, doing something haram, doing something bad. And it's a punishment for them. And in this way, that Allah sometimes rewards by letting you see your family and sometimes punishes. The significance of all of this is what? Is that today, if you knew what the most important thing in life is, for a fact, if all of the curtains were lifted off of your eyes, as it is done for the deceased, and you could see the most important things, you would want your family to make sure that Islam is a part of their decision-making process. That Islam is something that they pay attention to in every decision in life that they make. That my decisions about, for example, my job, my decisions, for example, about where I live, my decisions, for example, about who I go out with, should all be influenced by the presence of Allah. And in modern day, we're seeing that it's happening less and less. That more and more people, for example, delay marriage, delay having kids, don't want to have kids. Why? Because they say, well, it costs a lot. It's difficult. I have to compromise. I can't live my life the way I want to. But if you looked at what your life's goal is, and one of the most important things is always remember what your life's goal is. Your life has one goal, and we all have the very same goal. All of us. You guys know what it is? What's our goal? Oh man, it's even easier than that. You have one goal in life. Go to heaven. That's the only thing you need to be worried about, is go to heaven. Everything I do needs to be focused on one goal. Does this get me to heaven? That's all you got to worry about. Every decision you make in life, just think of one thing. I need to go to heaven. How does this get me to heaven? If you start thinking like that, you start making your decisions differently. For example, the concept of marriage, you don't delay it. You want to get married earlier. You want to look for marriage. Why? Because being married, مَنْ تَزَوَّجَ فَقَدْ أَحْرَزَ نِصْفَ دِينِهِ. Whoever gets married has protected half of his faith. Whoever wants to meet Allah on the Day of Judgment sinless should meet Allah with their spouse, and Allah will wash away their sins. This becomes one of the ways by which, for example, we promote marriage and we look for marriage. Why? Because it's something that helps me fulfill my purpose in life. This isn't just something I'm telling you. This was a conversation that Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam has with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Day after Imam Ali gets married, Rasulullah asks him, how did you find your wife Fatima? And Imam Ali says, I found no better partner in the worship of Allah than Fatima. The significance of Imam Ali's statement is that my goal is to go to heaven, my goal is to achieve Allah's pleasure, and my spouse is my best helper in achieving my goal. There could have been no one better to assist me in this goal. So our goal is to go to heaven, which is why every decision we make should be asking the question, is this getting me closer to my goal or not? Because think about it, if my goal is wealth, well, a pious person and a disbeliever both can achieve wealth. If my goal is power, power can be had by someone who's pious and someone who's impious. Meaning these aren't a sign of success in the eyes of Allah. Having wealth doesn't mean Allah loves you. Rather, Allah Himself says it in Surah Al-Fajr. فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ إِذَا مَا بَتَلَاهُ رَبَّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمَنِ وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَا بَتَلَاهُ فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانًا كَلَّا. These verses of Surah Fajr are very important for us to understand. Why? Because Allah is saying, if I take man, وَمَا بَتَلَاهُ, and I test him, وَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ, and I give him and with my generosity, and I give him from my bounties. He says, Rabbi Akraman, Allah has been generous to me, Allah loves me, Allah has rewarded me. And then Allah continues and He says, وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَا بَتَلَاهُ, and I test him, فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ, I take away his wealth and I make him poor. فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانًا, Allah has disgraced me or punished me. And Allah says, Kalla, that no, this wealth that you possess is not a reward. The poverty you possess is not a punishment. If Allah punished us in this world, then what would be the point of the Day of Judgment? We'd say Allah is unjust. He punished me once in this world, and then He punished me again in Akhirah. Meaning that the wealth that you receive, or the poverty that you are afflicted with, is a test from Allah. What do you do with the test? This is why your goal can't be wealth, because wealth is just another test. It's not a reward. The true reward is the Day of Judgment, is heaven and hell. That reward that once you receive it, it can never be taken away. That you only increase in it, it can never be decreased. This is why the dua that's being made at the end of Surah Furqan is to say, oh Allah, make my children the coolness of my eyes, in that they understand what their goal in life is, and that to achieve it, that religion and thinking about Allah in the Day of Judgment is a part of every single decision they make in life. This is a successful relationship. But understand something. This is what a good relationship looks like, that at the end, your children, your family, think about Allah in every decision-making process. This is the best situation. The baseline that we have is something different. The baseline, Allah makes the explanation, and He says, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ. This verse is what the baseline is. That, O believers, it is your responsibility to make sure that you protect your family from the fire of hell, whose fuel will be people and stones. Meaning that every one of us has the obligation to give our children religion and to make sure that they possess religion. It's not enough that, okay, fine, I made my child a Muslim and I'm done with it, or that we're Muslimin and that's enough for it. No, that's the bare minimum you have to accomplish, is that your children are Muslim. And this is what, for example, we saw from the Anbiya as well too. وَوَصَّى بِهَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ بَنِيهِ وَيَعْقُوبُ يَا بَنِيَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ اسْتَفَى لَكُمُ الدِّينَ فَلَا تُمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ Muslimun. That in Surah Baqarah, Allah describes and says that every prophet preached the same thing. Whether it was Ibrahim or Yaqub, they told their children, don't die except that you're a Muslim. The bare minimum is that my children are Muslim. The success is, the coolness of my eyes will be, they think about Islam and Allah in every decision that they make. But the least that I have to do is make sure that my family is Muslimin, and that my family is someone who believes in the religion of Islam. What happens if I don't do this? What's the other condition? Allah describes that as well too, that if you don't succeed in making your children Muslimin, Allah describes this as well too, where He says, يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ الْمَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ وَأُمِّهِ وَأَبِيهِ وَصَاحِبَتِهِ وَبَنِيهِ. There will be those group of people who Allah describes on the Day of Judgment will be those that will run away from their family. They will want no family connections on those days. And that on the Day of Judgment, every person will run away from their relatives, will run away from their mother and their father and their brothers and their friends. Why? Because they possess no good deeds of their own, so they start looking for other people to take from. So here Allah is giving us a stratosphere of explanations of what it is that you can do in this life. In this life, the bare minimum I have to do is make sure my family is Muslim. The better than that is that there are those people who think about Islam and Allah in every decision they make. And that on the other side of it is that if I don't give them religion, they will be those people who, instead of helping me on the Day of Judgment, will run away from me, will want no relationship with me, and will refuse to acknowledge the relationship they possess with me. This stratosphere gives us an explanation of the importance that if there is a family, how do I take care of it? But one of the most important things is having that family, is having those relationships. One of the famous statements of our Prophet is, he says, تَنَاكَهُ تَنَاسَلُوا تَكْثُرُ فَإِنِّي أُبَاهِي بِكُمُ الْأُمَمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ وَلَوْ بِالسِّقْطِ. Our Prophet makes a statement, he says, go out, get married, build connections, increase in your numbers, and I will intercede for my ummah on the Day of Judgment, even if it is by a miscarried child. Our instruction is to have families, to grow, and it's one of the things that is a part of our faith, that it's a good thing to have, and it's the legacy that preserves Islam within us, which is why you saw the Ahlulbayt would have children and would promote having children. And the Anbiya too would have children and promote having children, to have families. And then once you have that family, it's to make sure that your litmus is correct. That the bare minimum I did, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ. I protected them from the fire of hell. I followed the wasiyah of Anbiya. I made my children Muslimin. And once they became Muslimin, then after that, I went and I tried to make sure that their decision-making process was the best, and they became the coolness of my eyes. The significance of this whole discussion today is on the basis of the fact that is look at the children of Ahlulbayt. Look at the examples that they left behind with us. That they always made the effort to make Islam as a decision-making process and Islam as the priority in their children. And which is why they loved their children, and their children became a wasila for us to connect to Allah through them. Why do we gather and hold a majlis for the children of Ahlul Bayt? They weren't the imam, but they had proximity with Allah because of their good actions. And thus, therefore, their sacrifices made them someone by whom we can connect with Ahlul Bayt and we can connect with Allah. And that's the same thing we want to look for in our children. Now, the point of this is to understand then, if that's my goal and that's the measure of how I succeed, and that the success is encountered in the process of making them the coolness of my eyes and making religion as the decision-making factor, these elements now have to be paid attention to in our life. That do I do it myself? Look at the verse that talks about the idea that make your children, O Allah, habli azwajna wa dhurriyatana qurrata a'yun. Make them the coolness of my eyes. Look at how the verse completes. وَجَعَلَنِي لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. When I was young, I used to worry that this is a dua that we can't make. Is it permissible for us to make a dua that, oh Allah, make me an imam? Are you allowed to do that? And the truth of it is that yes, as a matter of fact, this is a dua that should be made by us. We should be asking Allah to make us leaders amongst the muttaqeen, amongst the pious people. But the significance of that dua, like I want them to be the coolness of my eyes, means that there are those who look at religion in every decision that they make. On the other side, the statement is saying, when it says, وَجَعَلَنِي لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا, and make me a leader amongst the pious people, is to say that to make my children like that, I have to be someone who prefers piety over self-decision and choices, who makes good decisions about piety and how I live my life, so my children become good, my family becomes good, my family follows the religion of Islam. Which is why, if you want to think about wonderful children like Bibi Sakina, Ali Akbar, or the children of Amir al-Mu'mineen like Muhammad Hanafiya or Abul Fadl al-Abbas, and how excellent they are, for those children to possess excellence, for that family to possess excellence, it comes from the father and the origination of the family first. That you have to enact faith first before you can expect your children to follow those processes. The interesting point when we ask the question in this verse and say, وَجَعَلَنِي لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا, and make me a leader from amongst the pious people, it's not just saying that I should be pious, or that make me amongst the pious people. No, my goal is that when I look for my sohbat, for my companionship, my environment, one, it begins with piety, and then two, it pushes me where I go out and I become the leader of those people by asking for Allah's assistance. Wow! That my decisions are made in piety. My decisions are made on the goodness of what Allah wants. And as I make those decisions, as I make that change in my life, my whole family changes in that process as well too, and starts to prefer what Allah desires over what humanity desires. This intersection about talking about praying for goodness is joined with the fact that I have to do goodness as well too. And this is where sometimes we fall apart, and these are where we start to pay attention. I want my child to read Quran, but they never see me read Quran. I want my child to pray on time, but they're never part of my prayer when I go to pray. To bring about some of these changes, one is that good company that you keep, and two is the environment that you create in the household. That do you sit with your family at the times of salat? Do you practice and work on religion with your family? Do you discuss religion in the household? And to be educated to have that discussion in the household of how to live that life, I have to make sure that I have good friends and company that make that as part of the conversation. Now, it doesn't mean that the only things that my friends can talk about is religion. But what it does mean is that before, for example, we begin talking about work, we begin talking about sports, we begin talking about buying, selling, all the other things of life, we as friends dedicate a piece of time to talk about faith or somehow challenge each other to grow our faith. Meaning that we may discuss some masail fiqhiyah and find someone amongst ourselves who is very good at fiqh and then discuss questions on that before we begin. Other times it's discussions around Quran. Sit and talk about the Quran, about memorization of the Quran. Memorizing the Quran is not just for children, it's for all of us. Until the day that we die, we should be spending time with the Quran. We should be increasing on that focus with the Quran. And one of the best things is with your friends. So that why you can become one of the leaders of the pious people, because you have an attribute about you that shows your love for Islam. How many of us can say, other than myself, because unfortunately I've kind of labeled myself already, that when you have a question about Islam, or when your friend has a question about Islam, they want your opinion on the subject. Maybe it's about understanding how, for example, Islam applies to my business. Maybe it's about how Islam applies to raising my children. Maybe it's about understanding some Islamic concept in usul, or understanding some Islamic concept in fiqh. But that my friends would ask my opinion instead of thinking, when they think about Islam and someone says, why don't you call one of your friends? They say, nah, they're all useless. They don't know anything. No, it should be something that we want as an attribute, and that's how we'll grow these attributes in our household and in our children. That our children will be the source of piety that we possess. This is one of the most important things about understanding why this religion and why being the coolness of your eyes won't come from a profession. Why? Because if I gave your child the best profession but he gave up his Islam, would you be happy? No. I don't want the best doctor if he's not a Muslim. I don't want the best engineer, the best lawyer, the best programmer, the best businessman if it means he's not a Muslim. So meaning that the dunyawi aspect of what I develop in the child is one thing. And don't give that up. That's a good thing to possess. But the religious aspect of the identity of how his faith is central to his personality or her personality is something I can't neglect. And that's why we say the coolness of your eyes will be that child who looks at Islam as part of their decision-making process and thinks about what Allah wants before they think about what they want. Look, for example, at the discussion around Ali al-Akbar. That when Abu Abdullah comes to the land of Karbala, they describe and say that when he stops, he has a dream in which a piebald dog tears at his skin. And Abu Abdullah wakes up from this dream on his horse and he says, Inna lillah. His young son comes to him and he says, Baba, why am I seeing you worried? He says, my son, I think we have reached the place where our shahadat will take place. The land in which we will be killed is what I am seeing here. Look at the conversation of Ali al-Akbar. He says, Baba, when we die, will we be on haqq? What's the question? Not the question of who will be our enemy, why will we be killed, what will be the reason, can we get away from this, can we pay for this, can we ransom ourselves? No, the simple question of the child is, will we be on haqq when we die? His father says, yes, certainly we will be on haqq when we die. So Akbar replies and he says, then Baba, who cares if we fall upon death or death falls upon us? It's not something I'm worried about anymore. Why? Because the priority is correct. The teaching of this, by the way, was in the Seerah of Amir al-Mu'mineen. In the speech of the Holy Prophet introducing the month of Ramadan to the Mu'mineen, to the believers, to the Muslimeen, in which famously our Prophet goes and he says, أَنَوْمُكُمْ فِيهِ إِبَادَةٌ وَأَنفَاسُكُمْ فِيهِ تَسْبِيحٌ وَنَوْمُكُمْ فِيهِ إِبَادَةٌ. That our Prophet explains and he says, this month of Ramadan is the greatest of barakah and the best of things that you can do. And in it, all of a sudden, your sleep becomes tasbih. Your breathing becomes ibadah. All these wonderful things happen for you. Imam Ali stands up in the middle of the speech and he says, Ya Rasulullah, what's the best thing we can do in this month? I know it's not Ramadan, but it's an important point. Watch the significance of how it rolls through. Rasulullah says, oh Ali, staying away from sinning is the best thing in the month of Ramadan. That is your best ibadat that you can do, is don't commit a sin in the month of Ramadan. They describe then Rasulullah began to cry in the middle of the majma. He said, Ya Rasulullah, why are you crying? Because he says, oh Ali, this is that month in which I will see your beard colored red with your own blood. Ali ibn Abi Talib turns and says, Ya Rasulullah, will I be on haqq when this happens to me? And Rasulullah says, certainly you will be on haqq, oh Ali. This is why they would describe that Imam Ali, for every year after Rasulullah, would look and see, when will my beard turn red with my blood? When will be my time to return? Because he knew he would be on haqq, therefore he wasn't afraid of this concept. In our lives, there's much change. We have good days, we have bad days. We have times when things work the way that we want them to. We have times when nothing we do works correctly. The most important tool to get through each of those times is to have yaqeen and certainty that all of my decisions are being made where Allah is pleased, not the fact that dunya is pleased. Shall we take an aside here for a second? You guys okay? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This is going to be a little bit of an educational point, but watch and see. You start having a bad day. Car breaks down, business is bad, tree falls on the roof. What's the first thing we say? Nazar, right? Nazar lagi. Who is doing this to me? Maybe somebody did black magic. Did you notice that whenever something bad happens to me, it's always somebody else doing it to me? It's nothing I did. We don't look internally. The first thing that should happen is if something bad happened, I should look internally. Did I take someone's right? Did I abuse somebody? Did I do something wrong? Did something wrong come into my affairs? No, we say, I am good. I couldn't do anything wrong. If I'm having a problem with somebody outside, who's doing it to me? Who is it that has a problem with me? We never take the time, and that's the thing. The mistake is we look outside and we blame somebody else for our problem. We say, it was running fine till today, so if something changed, it must mean somebody else did it to me. No, the first thing that should happen, and there's a few points in this. The first thing that should happen is I should look at my actions. Did I hurt somebody? Did I do something wrong? Did I make a mistake somewhere? This is why, even in Surah Fajr, the discussion that we had, where someone has wealth, they say, Allah honored me, Allah rewarded me. And when someone has poverty, they say, Allah punished me. Allah says, Kalla. بل لا تكرمون اليتيم ولا تحاضون على طعام المسكين وتأكلون التراث أكلا لما وتحبون ماله حبا جما صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Am I supposed to stop or we keep going? I think I have time. I think I have about 10-15 minutes. So I'm going to keep going in spite of the fact that we don't. Okay, there we go. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. صل على محمد. Ya Ali. Look at the description in Surah Al-Fajr itself. That you possessing wealth or you not possessing wealth and going through difficulty is more often because of your own actions than what somebody else did. So Allah says possessing wealth is not a reward and possessing poverty is not a punishment. Rather, these things change. Why? كَلَّا بَلْ لَا تُكْرِمُونَ الْيَتِيمِ. One, you don't honor and take care of the orphans. The beauty of the statement that Allah makes, بَلْ لَا تُكْرِمُونَ الْيَتِيمِ, is a description to say, not only is He telling you that you're not, for example, financially supporting an orphan. Sometimes the orphan doesn't need your money. They need your kindness. That's why Allah describes and says, karama, the mercifulness upon an orphan, you don't have it. وَلَا تَحَاضُونَ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. Allah doesn't say you don't feed the poor person. Allah says you don't invite others, you don't promote the feeding of the poor person, and therefore poverty afflicts you. Or Allah takes away your wealth. Or third thing Allah mentions, that you eat the inheritance without paying attention to whose right it is. And the fourth thing, and He says, which is the most effective one for us, is تُحِبُّونَ مَالَ حُبًّا جَمًّا. You love to amass wealth without taking consideration whose right is included. The significance of all of these is to say is that when a difficulty befalls you, it's more often because of the actions you did, not the actions somebody else did. When it comes to the actions that somebody else can do to us, to finish this aside, there are two things. One that we say is nadhar. You only need three things to break nadhar. Two really if you want to count it. Ma'udhatain and Ayat al-Kursi. Ma'udhatain is Surah Nas and Surah Falak and Ayat al-Kursi. These three things if you recite regularly, nadhar cannot bother you. It can't. Otherwise the promise of Allah is a lie. Ma'udhatain is the two seeking refuge, which is why قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ وَقُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. I seek refuge with the Lord of the dawn, and I seek refuge with the Lord of man. These two surahs are a complete protection. And along with him, Ayat al-Kursi, if it should happen that anything bothers me, these can break that nadar. The other thing that possibly you say is black magic. When it comes to the concept of black magic, our sixth Imam Jaffari ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salam explains it beautifully. He says if this black magic was real, then the person who is practicing it would live forever, be beautiful, and be wealthy. But they're not. Meaning the black magic that's utilized is often a waham. We're not even sure that it has a reality to it. It's more often a waham that places upon us. So meaning that don't even pay attention to it. Don't imagine that something can be more powerful than the will of Allah. If Allah has desired for me khair, who other than Allah can take it away from me? Don't let it overcome you. Instead, which is why, when difficulty befalls you, if your focal point is to think about Allah and heaven first, many of those difficulties you can overcome without ever having to worry about what went wrong. You can accept the fact that whatever Allah gives me is khair. And today, if Allah has decided for me not to have wealth, if Allah has decided for me not to have health, then that means that is the best thing that I can possess from Allah. And this is what we explained in the seerah of Ahlulbayt, that they were pleased with whatever Allah decreed for them. Radi bil qadri wal qada. Pleased with whatever Allah decides for us. On the basis of the fact that my qibla and my focus is that what Allah desires for me, and I make Allah part of my decision-making process. I think first, did I displease Allah? Is Allah happy with me? Did I do what Allah wants from me? If I can focus on these things, then it's no problem. The world comes and goes, which is why one of the famous statements of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, الدهر يومان اليوم لك ويوم عليك. This entire life is consistent of 2 days. One day that is for you and one day that is against you. Meaning that all of life, you will only have one of two conditions, where either things will go well or things will go poorly. But the reality is that every person faces both of these days in their life. Some days where things are good and some days that things are bad. You can't imagine that every day will be good and there'll never be a bad day. No, that would be a lie to the reality of what this world operates like. So which is why someone who acknowledges and understands that Allah has created this world where sometimes things will go well and other times Allah will test you by taking away from you. And that my decision-making process when I look at this world should be the concept of, am I associated with piety? Am I thinking about Allah when I make my decision? Am I thinking about my goal in life, which is to go to heaven, when I make my decision-making process? When I do these actions, then I can train my children and my family to do these actions, and that's when Allah will bless those children and those generations with being personalities who are good for our akhirah and leave a positive legacy in this world. That iman staying in my generations is one of the most important things that I can have. That my children and myself are those who follow the wasiyah of Ibrahim and Yaqub, that we don't die except that we follow the religion of Islam. Now understand how it can happen that when I raise my children with this perspective, I have children like the children of Imam Husain, who even in their moments of death are not focused on themselves, but are focused on the religion of Islam, are a symbol for the religion of Islam. When we look at, for example, the innocence of the daughter of Imam Husain, who dies in Sham, we see that she becomes an example and a wasila by which to reach to Allah. Why? Because her example was purity and simplicity in spite of difficulty and hardship. When you look and you see that Abu Abdullah leaves this child as one of the wasiyah and the points that he leaves behind, that be careful with my daughter, be careful with this small child. They would describe as a consequence of this, on the journey between Kufa and Sham, the enemies of Islam would keep these prisoners out under the open sun. They would describe and say that Imam Zainul Abidin would see his young sister overcome by the difficulty of heat. My Mazlum Imam would stand and make shade for her so that she would not suffer in that moment of being under the open sun. This was the innocence of this child and her love for Ahlulbayt, that in her final moments she continued to call for Abu Abdullah and called for the love of Islam for her father. There's such an interesting element that they describe and say that this child, when you look at history, there are two personalities known as Sakina or Sukaina. They are both the daughters of Imam Husain. One is older and one is very young. This isn't unusual. Why? Because when you look at the two daughters of Amir al-Mu'mineen, they too are both named Zainab and both have the title of Kulthum. We have differentiated them now that we refer to one as Zainab al-Kubra and the other one as Kulthum. Otherwise in history they have the same name, so why would it be surprising that Abu Abdullah names one of his older daughters Sukaina and one of his younger daughters Sukaina? This younger one, her attribute was such that they hid from her the fact that her father had become Shaheed. They go so far as to describe that why was she always in the company of Bibi Zainab, so that Bibi Zainab would have the consciousness that when they would bring the head of Abu Abdullah on a spear, she would keep the child from looking up. That she would protect the child even in the court, that she would not be able to see the head of her father. So that they would say whenever the child asked for her father, your father is on a journey, he will meet with you soon. There's a description that writes even in the court of Yazid, when he brought in the prisoners, there were 700 different people in that court watching this entire procession of prisoners. When they brought the head of Abu Abdullah, the women went behind the throne away from the eyes of people and they sat behind the throne. And Imam Zainul Abidin stand facing in front of Yazid. When the speech between Yazid and Imam Zainul Abidin became severe, there is a moment in which from behind the throne, Sayyidah Zainab says, "O Fatima bint al-Husayn, O my niece, stand up and look. Is your brother Zainul Abidin safe? If they are harming him, I want to stand up and protect him." Sayyidah Zainab says, I asked this question because I could hear someone being struck and I didn't know what it was. The daughter of Abu Abdullah stood up, looked from around the throne and sat back down crying. Sayyidah Zainab says, "Oh Fatima, what made you cry? Is your brother Zainul Abidin safe?" She says, "Oh aunt, my brother is safe, but the mal'oon is taking a stick and striking the head of my father in front of him." Sayyidah Zainab would hide this reality from a 4-year-old girl that she should not know this. Which is why, when in the prison they go, that 4-year-old girl now turns and goes to sleep or a state of unconsciousness in which she sees her father, and she wakes up crying and she says, "Oh aunt, oh mother Rubab, you told me Baba has gone on a journey, but I saw him in my dream. He is very close to us and he has called me to him. Let me go to my father." As the child began crying for her father and admitting the need of her father, her mother, her aunt, everyone began to weep. That now what do we explain to the child? That, "Oh child, you seeing your father in your dream is a sign that you are about to leave us soon as well." They describe and say the condition was so bad that in one moment they say Imam Zainul Abidin turned to Sayyidah Zainab on one of these days in the prison. He says, "Oh aunt, why do I see that you are sitting to pray your Salatul Layl? I have never seen you do this before." She says, "Oh Sajjad, they give such little food to the children that when they ask for food, I am embarrassed not to give them, so I give them my food. Oh Ali ibn al-Husayn, it has been many days, your aunt Zainab has not eaten anything either. The weakness is now forcing me into a condition where I am sitting to pray as opposed to standing." In that circumstance, when the child began to cry, "I want to go to Baba," the women had no answer except they began to cry with her. The majlis began, there was no one who could comfort the child. The crying from the prison rose to a level where they say the mal'oon said, "I cannot sleep. What prevents my sleep?" They said that there is the daughter of Husain crying for her father. The enemy of Islam said, "Then go give her father to her. Why is she disturbing my sleep?" They describe and say in this, as the majlis was in the zindan, a soldier opened the door and put a covered bowl in front of the child. The child complained, "I did not ask you for food." He said, "We have given you what you asked for. Lift the cover and you will find your desire." They describe and say a 4-year-old girl lifted a piece of cloth, saw inside of the bowl the head of her father. They say she made 3 statements. She looked at the head of her father. She says, "Baba, who colored your beard red with your own blood? Baba, who cut your veins? Baba, who made me an orphan when I am so young?" Saying these 3 things, the majlis and the crying increased inside until they said the child picked up the head of her father and suddenly she became silent. They said we gave her a moment because she had been crying for so long. She had finally found rest. They said we waited a moment. Then we said, oh child, wake up. But the child would not answer. Until eventually they said, oh Zain al-Abidin, your sister does not answer us, you awaken her. Imam Zain al-Abidin would reply, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. My sister has left this world. The masa'ib of this sister of Imam Zain al-Abidin do not end here. They describe and say that when her body was prepared for the janazah, the women of Sham came to do the ghusl. They saw the small girl, they said, we will not do her ghusl. Sayyidah Zainab would ask, why will you not do my niece's ghusl as you do everyone else's? They said, in her body is a disease. If we touch her, the disease will spread in the city of Sham. Sayyidah Zainab turns and says, oh Zain al-Abidin, they say your sister has a disease. Imam Zain al-Abidin would reply, Aunt, my sister does not have a disease. Rather, on the day of Ashura, when her skin became burned, no one healed her wounds. So her clothing has grown in with her skin and it makes it look as if it is sick. Sayyidah Zainab would say, I will do the ghusl of my daughter. Then you would hear her call out and say, oh Sajjad, when I try to remove the cloth, her skin comes off with it. Imam Zain al-Abidin will reply, oh my aunt, we will bury my sister like this. Do not remove her clothes. Which is why they describe there are two who are in a great state of difficulty, who had no one to assist them to bury someone. It takes two mahram. One who was Madhloom Ali ibn Abi Talib wa Fatima Zahra. That when he sat alone by her grave, he did not know how to lower her body in because there was no mahram to assist him. In the same way, there was no one for Zain al-Abidin in Sham who would assist him bury his daughter. We say for Amir al-Mu'mineen, it would have been the hands of Rasulullah that said, Ya Ali, return my amana to me. And Amir al-Mu'mineen would complain, Ya Rasulullah, when you left her with me, her ribs were not broken. Her eye was not injured. Her Muhsin was not shaheed. In Sham, when Imam Zain al-Abidin was alone with his sister trying to bury her, we would say it would be Abu Abdullah who would call, return my amana to me. And Ali ibn al-Husain would answer him like his forefather, Baba, forgive me, her ears were not ripped. Her face did not bear the marks of shimmer when you left her with me. Her skin was not burned when you left her with me. على لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. Raise your hands in dua. ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم. 10 times we call out, Ya Allah, 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 Ya Mahmoud بحق محمد, Ya أعلى بحق علي, يا فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة, يا محسن بحق الحسن, يا قديم الأحسان بحق الحسين. Oh Allah, accept this small ibadat from us. Ya Allah, give the thawab of this majlis to our marhumin, the marhumin of this sponsor, and all those who are in need of dua. Ya Allah, we have gathered here with hajat by the right of Ahlulbayt. Fulfill our hajat. Those amongst our family, our community, suffering through sickness and disease, give shafa'at to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Ya Allah, those suffering through strife and insecurity, give aman to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Ya Allah, keep us and our families on the upright religion of Islam. Hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our families from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. Entitle us to ziyarat of Ahlulbayt in this world, shafa of Ahlulbayt in the hereafter. Finishing this majlis with one surah al-Fatiha with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.